Good day to all of you. This is Alta Gracia from the Engr EMB Region 3. I'm part of the Clearance and Permitting Division. I am a licensed chemist, also took up diploma in general management after college in Ateneo, but also, of course, part of the alumni of the UPLB Chemical Society. I am also one of the board of directors for Integrated Chemists of the Philippines in Region 3. Tagging along years of experience and passion for environmental preservation, I'm happy to share to you today a podcast in Eat Green, your major contribution to environmental recovery. The second part of our presentation, since we now know how eating animals can be related to environment, ang letter B natin is how billions of individuals naman ang nakakaapekto sa ating environment. Sa global temperature, ito na yung application. Kanina kasi yung, just mainly on if we're eating it and knowing the impacts of the pollution. Pero yung global impact, ano ba talaga ito, no? Oceans, ice, and marine. Although walang tubig dito sa Pilipinas, no? As we all know, mamaya, mababanggit natin sa presentation. No? Number one, in this slide, is it's causing rising temperature. About 90% of the excess heat na tatrap sa atmospheric greenhouse, sa ating atmosphere, of the greenhouse gases is eventually soaked up in the world's oceans. Because oceans are so big, the temperature change to the seawater seems very small. And the sea surface layer has warmed over 0.5 degrees in the last century. Noon yon, guys, no? So, this is still enough to cause significant disruption and the warming. Ang problema, nag-a-accelerate siya. Of course, things expand, anything expands when they are being warmed, at least 99%, and it becomes less dense, mas magaang, and taking up more space. Ganon din yung sa ocean natin. Again, the slide is about rising temperature. Indeed, between 1993 to 2010, yung thermal expansion is thought to have raised the sea levels, maliit lang, 1.1 millimeters per year, accounting for much of the overall rise that we have seen. So warmer water influences the atmosphere above it. Increasing sea surface temperature na-associate with making yung mga hurricanes, tropical cyclones, nagiging mas powerful sila, potentially increasing the number of most severe categories of storms 4 or 5 that strikes in the lands and the coastal area. The warmer water can dissolve less carbon dioxide, obviously, while means more will stay in the atmosphere, accelerating global warming. So pag mainit yung ating tubig sa karagatan, hindi rin na-absorb yung carbon dioxide according to this study. So natitira siya sa atmosphere, no? Just like on land, rising temperatures in the oceans generate damaging heat waves. Heat waves kaya sumasakit yung ulo natin, ikinamamatay ng iba sa sobrang init. So yun yung epekto sa temperatura sa ating global epekto, hindi lang to in the local countries. The next effect of this is as carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, ang tinatawag na acidification, nagre-react siya to form carbonic acid. So yun yung carbon dioxide na na-dissolve sa ating seawater. It's a fairly weak acid but enough to alter the pH ng seawater, which is naturally alkaline, yung seawater natin. Since the Industrial Revolution, yung pagdidissolve ng carbon dioxide is estimated to have lowered the average pH of the top layer of the ocean by 0.1 pH units. That's about 8.2 to 8.1. 7 yung neutral if you're not very aware yet, no? The change does not sound so much, again, but because the pH is a measure on a logarithmic scale, it actually represents nearly 30% increase in acidity. That has some significant knock-on effects for seawater chemistry and the ecosystems that relies on it. The increase in acidity is particularly a bad news for shellfish and other forms of sea life that uses the mineral calcium carbonate to form their shells and exoskeleton. The more the acidic the water, more acidic water can hold less of these minerals. So there's a less available for the so-called calcifying organisms such as oysters, clams, sea urchins, corals, the deep and the shallow corals, the calciferous planktons. Worse, yung change in chemistry encourages existing carbonate structures to dissolve. My goodness, no? Just how disastrous that can be for our environment. Coral is particularly the most vulnerable. As you can see, nung bata pa ako, sobrang kulay na mga corals. Nung bumalik ako sa same place while I used to present for EIA, green na lang, no? Wala na yung mga colors talaga. Meron naging experiment niyan sa Australia na talagang yung effect ng pH on calcifications of corals and other in the sea, the creatures in the sea are very much affected. So, the next would be ocean currents. Ano yung epekto nitong bilyong-bilyong kumakain ng hayop? Which is hopefully na-reduce na day by day, no? Ano yung effect niya sa ocean current? Ano naman kung nagbago yung ocean current, no? So, sa slide na to, ocean currents are vulnerable to the effect of climate change, obviously. At present, those currents acts as a massive global conveyor belts. Imagine nyo na lang yung conveyor belts, ano? As winds push through the atmosphere from warm equator to the colder poles, they drag the surface water with them. So hangin ito, no, na nagpadala ng ating current paakyat. This is cooled by the chilly polar air and the water becomes denser. So it sinks into the deep ocean where it pushes back towards the equator. So ganun lang, kasimple ang ating global conveyor. Pero napakalaking impact nito, no? Yung less dense and rising when it is pushed back towards the equator, becoming warmer and less dense and rising as it goes, and the next batch of denser water coming from above. So round and round the cycle goes, transporting and mixing nutrients as they swell along. Now, melting ice interferes with this system. The huge amount of fresh water pouring in the polar lowers the density of seawater, making it slower to sink. Without the same driving force, the whole global cycle weakens. Based on what happens in the past, the scientists say slower ocean currents can bring significant changes in the Earth's atmosphere and so to the weather. That's why winters in Europe could be much colder. And an idea taken from the extreme in the film The Day After Tomorrow, if you've watched that. Meanwhile, the water in the South Atlantic become warmer, and because of sea surface temperature influences wind and rainfall, this could disrupt monsoon cycles that are vital for the crops in Asia and South America. So climate change continues. Many scientists believe it is inevitable that massive ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica will collapse and melt entirely, eventually pouring enough water to the oceans to raise global sea levels by several meters. So just imagine several meters yung pag-angat. And, if we will not stop and do our part as part of the billions who actually votes by our wallets, we vote by our wallets by buying to the industries or the sectors that are not supporting or not pushing for environmental preservation. On our next slide, of course, obviously, kayo na pati pinag-uusapan, the marine food chain collapse. What does that mean? Already under pressure na sila from overfishing, pollution, marine life, from large fish to down to the cyanobacteria. Ito, no, pinag-uusapan natin. Affected din sila ng climate change. Bukod pa dun sa katakot na plastic wastes and all the toxic chemicals na pinopour in natin sa dagat. As seas warm, habang lumalamig, umiinit yung tubig ng dagat, and the current shifts, some sea life can simply move. For example, towards the cooler water of the poles. Fine. Talaga pwede naman nilang gawin yun. Yung shift in the distribution have knock-on effect for species that feed on them. Yun yung problema. From people trying to catch tuna to fish looking for zooplankton. Yun ang tinitingnan natin dito. Under stress from shifting resources ang ating mga marine life, species are specifically or especially vulnerable if they are already weakened from acidification and oxygen depletion. So all of these effects due to climate change are very much heartbreaking. Unti-unti, isa-isa tayo. No? Siguro nakikinig lang ngayon, ilan ang nakikinig or a couple of more audiences. It's really heartbreaking. There are thousands of websites and a couple of documentaries that you can actually watch. We have Cowspiracy, Cowspiracy, and we have Seaspiracy, Seaspiracy. Those are very much related. And of course, the most popular that people would understand is the Game Changers. And will also answer your question, where do plant eaters get their protein, which is kind of funny for me right now because that's been 6 years. And of course, if we will redefine the food pyramid, of course, it looks different when you're a meat eater, but essentially, during the old times, fruits talaga yung main na kinakain ng tao, no? Let's just say, nagkaroon ng evolution, naging ganto, ganyan, at nag-iba yung katawan natin and all, but still, it was a choice, no? There are popular people back in many years that has become vegetarian kahit na panahon pa nung meron ng meat. So, it's always been available. The fruits as the strongest foundation of the food pyramid. And then like 50% of your healthy diet should go from calorie-wise should come from fruit. And then basically vegetables, eat as frequent as you could. And then towards the top of the food pyramid is of course whole grains, yung mga kanin. So syempre hindi naman talaga dapat yan kundi yung vegetable lang mas marami, which is kind of like flipping your mind right now most likely. Especially for heavy rice eaters. Kaya, ang sabi nila, rice daw yung culprit sa pagtaba, pero actually it's just because we're not eating in the right portions. Legumes, nuts, eat moderately because they're higher in fat. And finally, the top part, we always have is available. Ito yung mga nakakatulong sa mga taong gustong mag-transition na hindi pa nila kayang overnight, no? The processed vegetarian foods, yung mga cakes, ice cream, meron din kasing plant-based, no? And the reason why exactly a lot from the vegan communities are selling plant-based options because others are really having a hard time transitioning because of their emotional attachment to meat or to animal products. So having that said, I need to close the topic right now by giving you a summary of the entire presentation. For this last slide, in 3 simple summary. Number 1, reflect on what door towards eating green can help you decide for your health and for the environment. If you remember, we discussed about the doors, the beautiful doors. So, because it is easy to imagine a beautiful environment while on the mountains but not elsewhere. So support the industries that promotes environmental preservation. Number 2, due to obvious reasons, more and more corporations are giving plant-based options in their menu, but always choose local to cut off environmental effects on transportation and toxic preservatives. And lastly, the effect of eating animals on land area, water consumption, and its effect on rivers and groundwater is very, very obvious. Stop making the animals a middle carrier of our food and stop the cruelty that is not necessary. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.